Well, it appears this proposal of a European Super League, which poses an existential threat to football as we know it, is going ahead.
Now, this is a move that is set to blow apart English football.
The owners of these teams have displayed the worst kind of greed I've ever seen in sport.
The fans were not consulted in any way, shape or form.
It's like they're ripping my heart and soul out of it.
I asked this board member if civil war had now broken out in football.
Manchester United fans are now on the pitch.
He said to me, this is not civil war, it is a nuclear war.
Around this time last year, the European Super League was formally announced. Though the fiasco only lasted a little over 48 hours, it might just be the biggest controversy this sport's seen. Definitely the biggest I've been around to experience firsthand. Because here we are, a year later, still feeling its deep scars, and I don't think that's going to go away for a while. So let's look back. Let's revisit how this all went down, why it failed so miserably, and why the threat of the Super League isn't quite over like you think it is. If there's a message you should be taking out of this video, it's that cash is king, even in football. Now, the creation of the Super League wasn't the start of cash being king in this sport, but it's kind of like the moment where we realized it was. I'm not saying money shouldn't have a place in this sport. Obviously, it's a necessity. But there are times where it just gets a little bit excessive. Just look at where the World Cup's gonna take place this year. I don't want to make any accusations and end up missing one day, but the way that FIFA gave the World Cup to Qatar was sketchy, to put it lightly. You can look at how many more jerseys teams released year upon year. Just look at Napoli, they have 13 kits this season, all splattered with more sponsors than they ever did even 10, 20 years ago. Even if you want a recent example, look at the Copa del Rey final, aka the Spanish Cup final. One of the biggest games among Spanish teams was played in Qatar. The reason? Take a wild guess. Money impacts every facet of football, more than almost any sport in my opinion. You know, if football is a religion, then money is God. Simple as that. So how did it get like this? Why so sudden? How so severe that we ended up with this European Super League? This is, of course, my opinion. Does it go farther back than this? Probably, but I think this is really where it starts. I think it started with the massive takeovers we've seen over the last few decades. It started with Chelsea. Roman Abramovich bought them to take some of his money out of Russia. Of course, that's kind of gone tits up now, but both the success on and off the pitch of Chelsea kind of laid out the blueprint for other investors to do the same. Man City were bought from some members of the royal family of Abu Dhabi. PSG were also taken over from Qatari investment. Red Bull bought a whole bunch of clubs all over the world. They're all dominating their league now. And even most notably, most recently, Newcastle were taken over by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. When takeovers like this happen, those clubs overnight become some of the richest in the world and instantly start doubling, even tripling the spending of their competitors. I talked about this a lot with Manchester City. If you want to see more of that, you can click right up there. So instantly, spending an exuberant amount of money in the transfer market not only became an option, it kind of became a necessity to start winning in your league. So then all of a sudden, every big club is spending crazy amounts of money on bringing new players in and paying their wages. Then the mid-table teams have to spend even more than they're already paying to keep those higher teams in sight. And then before you know it, the whole entire market is inflated. Some player that might have gone for £5 million in 2010 is now worth £30 million in the 2020 market. So pretty quickly, clubs had to find a way to justify this increased spending. Soon enough, the yearly money they'd receive from their leagues wasn't enough. Then the leagues and cup competitions teams were competing in had to find more ways of gaining revenue as well. Compound that over a few years, and before we knew it, we ended up with a Copa del Rey final played in Qatar. Cash is king, ladies and gentlemen. This is the direction we've been heading in, just at a slow enough pace to not cause an uproar among player, coaches, and fans. This was until the pandemic hit, where the financial future of every club and league was put into jeopardy. Matchday revenue like tickets, concessions, stadium tours accounts for around 1/8 of a club's yearly revenue. Take that away, and it puts a really big strain on the balance sheets. Some teams were getting really desperate during these times. Everyday workers were laid off. Some players weren't even paid, and fans who paid season tickets on the season and weren't allowed to come didn't even have their tickets refunded. Yeah, there were some really appalling actions taken by clubs in those early months of the pandemic. And looking back, it probably should have been more of an indicator that a European Super League was certainly a possibility. Which brings us to over a year later.
The timing is hideous. Where do these people, what world are these people living in?
This was your typical Sunday. I remember waking up that day and the only thing about football I had on my mind was Man United playing against Burnley that day. But there was other news that overshadowed all the games played that day. The Times were reporting that a European Super League was in the works, with all the big 6 English clubs all on board. Soon other reports confirmed the rumors, and within a matter of minutes it felt this was the only thing the football community were talking about. Then more details emerged throughout the afternoon. There was a rumored 12 founding clubs all sharing a £3.5 billion infrastructure grant. Ex-players turned pundits were really harsh, particularly Gary Neville, who did not hold back on Man United, his former club. And the reaction on social media was even louder. FIFA was against it. UEFA was against it. Hell, even the UK government, including Boris himself, was against it.
I think it's not in the interests of fans, it's not in the interests of football. Be in no doubt that we don't support it.
Believe me when I say that nobody wanted this. The backlash was so powerful, so loud, so united that I remember joking to my friend, can you imagine if they actually go through with this now? And then they actually went through with it.
12 of Europe's leading football clubs have today come together to announce they have agreed to establish a new midweek competition governed by its founding clubs. Who are the founding clubs? Confirmation: AC Milan, Arsenal, Atletico Madrid, Chelsea, Barcelona, Inter Milan, Juventus, Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United, Real Madrid and Tottenham Hotspur have all joined as founding clubs.
I was absolutely just like many others were across the world. At around 6:15 my time, all these 12 founding clubs of the Super League put out statements to announce their commitment to the project. The way they're announcing it was so serious too, like they were sorry to be delivering this news to us, which, to be fair, they probably were. It was pretty satisfying seeing all these teams get ratioed on Twitter though. This was one of the only times in my life where I've had my non-soccer friends come to me to ask about soccer. That's when I knew how big of a story this was. The next 24 hours were absolutely mental. Protests all over Europe. Some of the Super League teams even had games that next day, but that didn't matter to any of us at that point. Even players on teams not a part of the Super League had the freedom to come out and make it clear that they shared our same sentiment. This wasn't only a fan thing. Okay, but let's slow down for a sec. Maybe if you weren't into football that much at that time, then you may not understand why this was so unpopular. A little explainer for those people. This was going to be a season-long tournament with all the biggest clubs in Europe participating. They'd start in a league format and then move into some playoff system to decide a champion, just like they do in American sports. Alright, that sounds pretty cool. The best teams, the best players, the best coaches all going up against each other on a regular basis. Why did everybody want this? The answer is that we already have this. It's called the Champions League, and we absolutely love the Champions League. Some of the sport's most iconic moments has gone down in that tournament. Originally dubbed the European Cup, the tournament's been running since 1955. It starts in a league or group format and then moves into some playoff system to decide a champion. Sound familiar? On the outside, it just looked like a rebranded Champions League, but you only had to do like a few minutes of research to realize that these things were going to be very different. Just to name a few, here are some factors that would have made the Super League not only different, but significantly worse to what we already have right now. Number one is that it was going to be run by the clubs themselves. The Champions League, for example, is run by the Union of European Football Associations. UEFA. It's run by UEFA. They're basically like the head of European football. International tournaments like, say, the Euros are also run by them. Similarly, the World Cup is run by FIFA, which is basically UEFA, but for the whole world. And every domestic league or cup competition is run by that country's own football association. These are independent organizations. They don't have any biases or ulterior motives. They're just there to supply the infrastructure and to make and set the rules. There is no such association behind this proposed Super League. The only executives that we knew of was going to be Florentino Perez, president of Real Madrid, Andrea Agnelli, chairman of Juventus, and Joel Glazer, co-chairman of Manchester United. This was going to be a league operated by some members of its teams. Imagine the problems or controversies that could have caused. The second reason is that it just killed competition, jeopardy in this sport, any sliver of it that we had left. Listen, if you want to take part in the best competitions in the world, first you gotta qualify for them. Say in Europe's top leagues, if you want to play in the Champions League, you gotta finish in the top 4 in your domestic league. You know, this makes things exciting. Even this season, although United's trying to drive me into a depression, at least our games are still suspenseful because of this top 4 race that's going on. One of the rules of the Super League was that its 12 founding clubs would always keep their spot in the competition, no matter how crap they were doing domestically or continentally. You know, if this was still going ahead, United could be relegated this season, theoretically, and they would still keep their spot in the Super League. You know how stupid that is? That is a violation of sport. A massive middle finger to all these smaller teams not invited to the Super League. And even beyond that, the additional revenue that these teams would get would only widen the gap they have with everyone below them. It's a problem already, but it only gets worse with this Super League. We love these David and Goliath stories in sports, where an underdog comes along and overcomes all the odds. Think Leicester 2016. Although already unlikely, the Super League would have killed any chance of a Leicester story ever happening again. And you know, I may be a fan of one of these Super League teams, but above all of that, I'm a fan of football and sport in general. So I just can't back something like that. It's like supporting the Warriors in 2017. Who does that? And number 3 was just the blatant greed behind this move as a whole. You know, you can go to the official Super League website, which a year later is still up today, and even in that initial statement, they don't hide the fact that money was the driving force behind this move. They made such a big deal about how this Super League was gonna save football, and that it was a necessity because of how rough of a spot COVID had put these teams in. But at the same time, they were directly ruining the leagues they were already a part of beforehand, in turn damaging the future of the hundreds of smaller teams they were already competing against, who, by the way, were much more threatened by COVID than any of these big Super League teams. Of course, they said they were going to have discussions with FIFA and UEFA to help out these smaller teams, but would you really trust Emperor Palpatine looking ass over here to watch out for these smaller teams? Hell no! Plus, you know, on a deeper level, coal miners, railway workers, priests, these were the type of people that gave birth to what is now some of the biggest teams in the world. They were never meant to be franchised like they are today. See, this is like the Americanization of this sport. One of the only sports that hasn't really been Americanized yet. These mega rich venture capitalists are taking ownership of our clubs and, well, they're acting like venture capitalists, putting money forward above anything else. It's elitism. You know, take a look at the owners of the big 6 teams in England. 3 of them are American, 1 is a Russian oligarch, 1 is basically state-owned, and 1 and only 1 is owned by an actual Brit. These people didn't enter our game out of love for the sport. Owners don't care about our history or our culture. The only time they actually give a sliver of attention to us is when they're trying to sell us something. Of course, they say they care about us because they have to say that, but in reality, the dollar is their #1 priority, and their commitment to the Super League is only evidence of that. On a basic level, football is meant to be accessible to everybody. It's one of the only sports where all you need is just a ball. That's one of the reasons why it's grown to be the world's biggest sport. It's a sport that's been created by the poor and kind of stolen by the rich. And these bozos only had the balls to announce this during a time when fans weren't allowed into stadiums or allowed to group together to protest. They knew from the start that fans wouldn't like this idea. They even saw the initial reaction when the Super League was just rumored. And they still went ahead with it. It makes me absolutely sick. And imagine what the evolution of this Super League would have been. We would have been seeing Juventus versus Real Madrid in freaking Singapore within a few years. I guarantee it. They didn't think people would see right through them, but they did. Absolutely everybody did. On Monday the 19th, Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola came out on the same day to protest against this Super League, even though they're part of clubs committing to the Super League. That same day, Tottenham fired Jose Mourinho, which was just a little too much of a coincidence. The UEFA president Alexander Ceferin gave a speech that Monday claiming, quote, "I didn't know we had snakes so close to us. He also informed the players of these Super League teams that if they went ahead with this, they wouldn't be allowed to participate in the Euros. I don't even know if that would have been legal, but he was pulling out all the stops. All throughout that Monday and Tuesday, just about every important personality in football who was allowed to talk about the Super League came out and condemned it, making it clear that this plan had absolutely nobody behind it. Then, not even 48 hours after the initial Super League announcement, a protest had formed outside of Stamford Bridge, preventing the Chelsea team bus to enter the stadium, forcing them to delay their match they had that day against Brighton. It was during these protests that news dropped that a selection of English teams were preparing to drop out of this Super League. You can look back at the videos and see as the crowds erupt as the news circulates around them.
No way. No way. Oh my God.
Man City became the first team to officially withdraw. Then Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, Man United, and finally Tottenham. Rumors continued that some Italian and Spanish teams were set to withdraw as well, prompting a statement from the Super League reading that they were going to step back and take time to reshape the project, but that all imminent plans had been suspended. We won. It was over. Just like that, not even 48 hours after the official announcement, it was over. It was wonderful. Like, the fans had won. We were all celebrating together for once. Protests didn't end. We wanted these owners out to ensure that the Super League would never happen again. We wanted fan ownership schemes like they had in Germany, which is why clubs like Bayern and Dortmund knew to stay away from this Super League. It really felt like the owners of these clubs had backed themselves into a corner. Their relationship with the fans, which were already terrible before the Super League, were now completely beyond repair. With rumors circulating that there were potential buyers for some of these teams, surely they had to sell at this point. Well, it's now been a year, and out of the 12 ownership or leadership groups that put their teams into the Super League, none of them have left. It's still the same people there. Only one is in the midst of changing, but only because of government sanctions against the owner, not because of anything to do with the Super League. So I don't know about you, but as long as these businessmen are still there, I'm still going to be worried about the future of our game. And you know, the Super League still isn't dead, technically. There are still 3 teams who have never announced their departure from the project or have even apologized for it. One of those teams is Real Madrid, whose president, Florentino Perez, said as recently as November that the Super League wasn't dead. This is just a hunch, but there may be something brewing under our noses that we don't know about yet. Will we ever find out about it? Maybe. But even if the Super League never comes back, the core issue still remains, and that is that these top teams still have way too much power. The reason teams wanted out of the Champions League in the first place was that they realized, hey, we're the attraction, not the competitions we play for, so let's stop sharing the revenue that we generate with UEFA and any of these smaller teams. It was always just gonna be about power and money. And yes, as things stand, these teams will be remaining in the Champions League. But at the very least, what this whole fiasco did was demonstrate to UEFA that their biggest assets weren't afraid to leave them if they weren't getting what they want. And recently, it seemed like UEFA is gonna be giving these teams what they want, which is more money and more power. The new Champions League format starting in 2024 brings more games and more teams to the competition, despite growing concerns that athletes in this sport are playing way too many games at the moment. When asked about how this benefits the wider game, UEFA's response was, quote, "The changes made are designed to secure the positive future of European football at every level and meet the evolving needs of all its stakeholders." Translation, we need more money to give to these teams. I'm not trying to be ignorant of the fact that even the biggest teams in the world have been put into a financial hiccup due to COVID. But I mean, looking at the actions of these Super League teams over the last year, and you think they're doing just fine. Again, Florentino Perez said the Super League was in place to save football. And he went on for ages about how rough of a spot Real Madrid were. And then he bid a world record transfer fee for Kylian Mbappe in the summer, despite him only having a year left on his contract. Make it make sense. Chelsea bought Romelu Lukaku for 100 million. City bought Jack Grealish for 100 million. United brought back Cristiano Ronaldo and are now paying him £500,000 per week. It looks to me like next to nothing has changed. And especially as a United fan, it baffles me how the Glazers got away with this. Allow me to tangent for a second. On May the 2nd, Man United fans had a massive protest against the Glazers. Some of them even broke into Old Trafford and spilled onto the pitch. It was the first time in Premier League history that a match had to be suspended due to a protest. Is that a good thing or bad thing? That's for you to decide. Now, in the midst of these Super League protests, our owners promised that they'd be creating some sort of fan share scheme, meaning the fans would have a voice like never before, and more importantly, the owners of our club would be selling some of the shares to us. It has now been a year, and they have done nothing on that front. All we've heard about this fan share scheme is that the owners aren't willing to give up even a fraction of the shares that they said they were going to sell to us. I can go on and on about how terrible these Glazers are, but this is about football as a whole. And yay, for now we've still got a hold on our game, but even after a year of fallout from the Super League, we haven't killed the root of the problem. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but I feel like the protests have lost steam, and the parasites in this game are all still employed. So have we, as a community, done enough to stop the Super League from ever gaining steam again? I don't know. Maybe one day we'll know the answer to that, but for now, these billionaires still hold the keys to our game, and we're still just here for the ride. Ciao.